Yeah. Tonight's Parsha that we are learning is in Parshas Emor, that you can find in your Chumashim. It is obviously in the book of Vayikra, the third book of the Chumash, and this is on chapter 21. In the book of Vayikra, and it discusses all the holidays are being discussed in this week's Parsha. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, counting of the Omer, giving charity. Tishrei is a month with a lot of holidays. It's a good time to travel to your Rabbi. But he couldn't make it for Tishrei. He was wondering what should he do. He was missing. He wanted to spend the holidays with his Rebbe. So he was suggested to travel for Shabbat Emor. Because if you read this Parsha, you're reading about all the holidays. So you're going to be combining it all to one Shabbos. What we are going to discuss tonight is the first verse of this Parsha. The verse begins, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. God said to Moses, Emor el HaKohanim bnei Aaron. Emor means speak or say to the Kohanim, to the priests, which are Aaron's sons, because all Kohanim are descendants of Aaron HaKohen. And you should say to them, Lenefesh lo yitamo be'amov. Let no Kohen, priest, become tamei. Tamei means ritually impure. How do you become ritually impure? As we're going to see in the next two verses, it talks about specifically to coming in contact with a dead person. Basically, a Kohen cannot tend a funeral or burial. A Kohen is not allowed to do it because by coming in contact with the dead, he brings upon himself a state of tumah, of impurity. There are 7 exceptions to whom a Kohen is allowed to participate at their burial or funeral, and the exceptions is Kim Leshe'ero Yakorov Elov, to his closest relative, which, as is explained, that means his wife, who is the closest relative to the Kohen. This is number 1. Le'imoi, the mother, Ve'le'aviv, and to his father, Ve'livnoi, and to his son, Ve'libitoi, or his daughter, Ve'le'achiv, and his brother. And regarding sisters, it's only la'choisa yapsulo akroivo elov. It's only the sister who is still close to him because she was not married yet. Lo yoisho leish. She was not married to any man. Lo yitamov. To hear, he can and he should become ritually impure by participating in her funeral. So a Kohen really cannot go to a funeral. A Kohen cannot enter the cemetery. With these 7 exceptions that he goes and he's fully part of it. The rest is, again, very special laws in regarding to a Kohen. Most of them are restrictions. A Kohen cannot marry a woman who was in a relationship with someone other than a Jew because she cannot be married to. So it's also cannot consider to be a candidate to marry a Kohen. A Kohen cannot marry a woman who the father was a Kohen, but he married a divorcee. The child is called Halolo. This is described on verse 7. Desecrated from priesthood. So a Kohen cannot marry here. And the Torah also tells us at the same time some positive treatment that we give a Kohen. As you see on verse 8, he should be holy. Basically, we honor him by being the first in all the matters, whether it's matters of getting called up to the Torah, he's always the Kohen first. If it comes to lead benching, it's the Kohen first. And this is special restrictions to a Kohen, followed with special laws in regarding to a Kohen Gadol. A Kohen Gadol, as you see on verse 11, he cannot even participate at the funerals of his parents. Ve'al kol nafshot met lo yavo. He should not come under the same roof of any dead bodies. It should not make himself ritually impure to bury his father or his mother, either not. When it comes to married, a Kohen Gadol has even further restrictions than a regular Kohen. A regular Kohen cannot marry a divorcee, cannot marry a woman who converted to Judaism. A Kohen Gadol cannot even marry a widow, even though the regular Kohen is allowed to marry a widow. He can only marry a virgin, a woman, a girl who was never married, as you see on verse 13. Vehu isha bifsuleo ikoch. He should only marry a woman who is a virgin. Very strict, very specific on verse 14. He may not marry the following: a widow, a divorcee, a woman who was born from a union which violates its sacred character, which I gave you the example before. A Kohen who married a divorcee, their child cannot be married to a Kohen Gadol, etc. Then we also have interesting laws which relates to the physical appearance of the Kohen. A Kohen with physical disabilities is also disqualified to serve as a Kohen, which is a very sensitive issue in today's days when we have so much spending efforts in ensuring that disability has access to every situation. Is a separate discussion. Why is it when it comes to a Kohen, we are even disqualifying them, but very clear in the verses. It's different types of disabilities, which appears in its physical form. And many other laws of a Kohen, like I said earlier. But let's go back to verse number 1. The verse starts up, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Emor el HaKohanim. What is Emor el HaKohanim means? Speak to the Kohanim. Then what did it say? Ve'amarta alayhem. And you should speak to them. What's the double repetition of speak? Emor means speak. Ve'amarta means speak. So Rashi brings, and then you see it in the footnote in your Chumash that you have in front of you, the double expression, speak and say, means that in addition to telling the priest to observe those precepts, Moses should also warn the adult priests about the education, about educating their children in this area. Emor is to the adults. Ve'omarta, and you should say to them, there's an additional saying. What's the additional saying? That it's not only that you should speak to the Kohanim, the adult Kohanim, in regarding all these restrictions. Don't go into a cemetery and don't marry this type of woman. there is also an obligation for the Kohanim, a special obligation to tell them that they should ensure non-adult Kohanim are also required to protect, and you have to make sure that you don't allow a Kohen lead a Kohen into a cemetery, and you don't have your Kohen's son marry a divorcee. All this is part of the mitzvah of Kohanim. In the words that the Talmud uses it, it's called lehazir gdoilim alaktanim. Hazir usually comes from the root azara. Azara in Hebrew means warning. Lehazir kohanim alaktanim means to warn that the adult kohanim should also educate their children in the areas that we just spoke about. Okay? This is the first verse. Rashi actually takes us from the Gemara. If you look in the Talmud, page in Yevamot, page 114a in the bottom of the page, I believe it is. Look at the Daled. Yeah. The Gemara there in Yevamot brings, there are actually 3 areas in the Torah that we find this concept of adults making sure that their children are being educated and protected from violating those prohibitions that the adults were warned. One is in regard to eating blood, and one is in regard to eating the creepy things, the shekets, right? And one is our Parsha, which talks about ensuring that the young Kohanim are not getting, are being watched by the adult Kohanim. Emor ve'amarta, 2 special statements of speaking. So the Gemara says as follows. It says in the Torah regarding creeping creatures. So it says in the Chumash, we have it in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 42. It says, Lo tochlum, you shall not eat them, ki sheketz ein, for they are an abomination. Okay? So this is what the Pasuk says, specifically regarding creeping creatures. So lo tochlum is also explained by the Torah as if it reads lo tachilum. You should not cause others to eat them, which means to tell you that an adult is responsible of holding off from feeding a young child with those shratzim, with those creeping creatures. Right? Exactly. Then there is a second verse, which is in regard to blood. It says, also in Leviticus, in Vayikra chapter 17, verse 12, it says, Kol nefesh mikem lo tochal dam. Every soul among you shall not consume blood. So this verse is also translated as lehaz the gdolim alaktanim, to warn adults with regard to minors. And the third is what we just read from Rashi. This is what the Gemara says in Yevamos. Actually, the Gemara there goes and continues with just going to say it in short. This is not a Talmud class, but the Gemara actually says, why is it necessary to write it specifically in regard to 3 cases? In other words, you can write it in one place, and that will become a general warning that we should not feed anything which is forbidden for an adult is also forbidden to provide to a minor. Why do you need special psukim? So the Gemara says like this. If it would only be written in regarding to creepy things, I would say that when it comes to the creepy things, creeping creatures, their prohibition is very severe. The quantity of a sheketz, the quantity of a creeping creature is the most minimal quantity. As long as it's a creature, there's not usually we have sizes in order to fulfill a mitzvah of matzah. You can't just eat a crumb of matzah, you have to eat a kazait of matzah. Challah and Shabbos, kazait. In order to even violate the prohibition of non-kosher, there has to be a size when you get lashes. If it's sizable, if it's like a zayit or things like that. By a sheketz, by a creeping animal, creature, it is the most minimal, as long as it's alive, it can be the size of a garnish, most minimal size. If you ate it, you already get lashes. So you would say, okay, that's why, since it's such a strict prohibition, so we know that we should be careful even for providing it to minors. But blood, to be liable for the prohibition of drinking blood, it has to be a revit, 4 ounces of blood. That is when you violate the prohibition. So maybe there wouldn't apply. But therefore, the Torah has to mention it both cases, in the case of creeping creatures and in the case of blood. So then the Gemara says, maybe write it only in regard to blood. And we would learn not from blood into anything else. So the Gemara says, no. Blood is a certain severity, stringency, which the other prohibitions don't have. What is the severity of blood? If you drink blood, you get karet, which is a very severe punishment. We don't find the punishment by eating a creeping animal. So maybe if it would only, the Torah would have only said by blood, it would say blood is unique. Blood is an exception because blood is karet, karet, right? But therefore blood is special. So the Gemara says, okay, so in that case, maybe you write it only regarding blood and creeping things, and you would know regarding the other prohibition. Why does it have to say in this week's Parsha, Emor ve'omarta, that we should have to protect children and minors from violating prohibition? We already know from the fact that it's written in regarding to blood and in regarding to creeping creatures. So we know that the Torah doesn't just warn you, but the Torah also wants you to make sure that you don't let younger kids violate it. Why does it have to say regarding Kohanim? Why does Parshas Emor have to write it? So the Gemara says, because we would say, Kohanim is only for Kohanim. If it's only for Kohanim, it's easier. So a prohibition which is only for Kohanim is not so important that they have to also make sure that the minors are not violating it. So that's why we have to write about it. So Gemara said, 1 second. So write it only by Kohanim. And from Kohanim you learn to everybody else. The Gemara says, no. If you would only write it by Kohanim, so someone else would come and say, Kohanim have a lot of extra mitzvot. So therefore, we are also, they cannot marry certain people, they cannot go to funerals, they have extra restrictions. So maybe it's only applying to Kohanim, also this concept of lehazir gdolim al aktanim, to protect minors from violation. And that's how the Gemara comes to the conclusion that it's necessary to write it by this week's Parsha, Emor ve'amarta, is to ensure that not only the adults keep to it, but also the minors are being protected from violating it. It's important to specifically write it in regarding to the prohibition of eating blood. And it's again also important to mention it into the prohibition against eating from the creeping creatures. Nachon? This is the Gemara. So the bottom line is that it's mentioned in 3 places, and from these 3 places, we are learning it out into any other prohibited concept that we are always, whatever is forbidden to an adult, he has an obligation to educate also the younger minors, that they should also be sure to follow the same restrictions. What's the message after all that it's specifically written in those three, in the context of those three: blood, creeping creatures, and the impurity for Kohanim? That's the question that we would like to discuss tonight. Just to mention, obviously, before we continue, the fact that you see that even a minimal, tiniest creeping creature is forbidden teaches us what is the quality of something prohibited. What's the idea of prohibited item? Prohibited items means that it belongs, like Hasidus played, the Rebbe speaks in Tanya, chapter 7, it is part of the Shalosh Klipos Atmeos. It's a part of the world of Klipa, of impurity. So, but in the world of impurity, is such a negative power that every minimal part of it has the ability to draw you into impurity, to draw you into uncleanness, and obviously we have to stay away from it. And the prohibition of blood that teaches you, obviously, that ultimately by keeping any violation, karet creates a cut. Some violations gives you a big cut, takes up the whole cord, and some cuts off some strings, but eventually every string which gets detached, you're creating a weakness into the entire relationship, into the whole connection. That's why we understand and appreciate the importance of staying away from doing availers. And obviously that's why we are all responsible to take care even on the minors, to teach them about it, because in our neshama, we are all interconnected. This is the responsibility that we have one for each other. And it's all driving from the same nucleus power that connects us, which is also the nucleus power that we are trying not to detach ourselves from our connection to God. But why either these three? What is so special about these three? So there's an interesting letter, it's actually three letters, written in the same time, the same year, by the Rebbe, 1943 and 1944. I'm going to read for you. I have a copy from the letter which is written on the 11th of Iyar, 1944. This is books, Igrot Kodesh, which has letters from that time. The Rebbe was writing and communicating and involved, especially with the efforts of education and reaching out to Jews here in America. This letter is written to a famous rabbi who lived here in America with the name of Rabbi Dr. Eli Young. He was originally from Lithuania, from Poland, very, very close to, was the leading rabbi here in America during the wartime and after. He was the one who started up the OU organization, came from Dr. Young. He was personally involved in helping the previous Rebbe to come out of Poland and from Riga to America, very active on the affairs with the government to get the Rebbe out and safely come here to the United States. Very special person. So the Rebbe writes to him in 1944 regarding these three things. And he says that these three things is really the three significant areas which a person may consider that if a person is involved in any of these three, or it's an area that I don't see how am I going to be able to try to educate it. It's basically areas which you feel like hopeless in your relationship of helping him. And Dafka necessarily in these three places, it would the Torah comes to specify the importance of lehazir gdolim al aktanim, how much it is important to to put your efforts in protecting that minor from falling and stumbling and remaining in this situation. What is it about these three things?
So all minors, right?
All minors.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Ritva Kohanim from this we learn out that every adult is required, every father and every adult is required from holding the minors from violation. What does this three things? So the Rebbe writes as follows. Number one, there's a type of child. Child doesn't necessarily mean in years, that on your passport you are only 12 and not 13. A child can mean someone with a white beard, and he's still a child because he never learned and never experienced. So he's very young. Like David Schneider says, he's only 39. I mean, nothing specific in what I'm saying, but not. I don't think that's what he means. But there is such a concept of being a minor. Even on the passport, you're already a senior citizen with all the rights of a senior citizen. So the Rebbe says as follows: what is the area of creeping creatures called shkatzim? Very interesting. The Gemara says, in regard to shkatzim, why is it called sheketz? The Gemara says, nafsho shel adam katsa ba'em. This is not something that you have to be warned about. A person, normal people, feel disgusted by eating them. A normal person, a healthy human being, you offer him a plate of ants and cockroaches, his natural expression has to be yichs. A person who opens a fig and he sees a crawling worm in it, tiny little, he has to go and say, woo. If you don't say ooh, something is wrong with you. The Gemara says, Nafresh shel Odom kotzaboy. What does it mean, practically speaking? You have a child, and he feels himself comfortable with eating shkatzim. So you say to yourself, this is not normal. The Torah expects me to educate this kid. He's a sugar. He's living a life of filth. He's watching filth and dirt. What am I going to try even to educate him? There's no one to talk to. I'm going to raise my hands and say, if this is his area, if he is watching pornography, he's eating cockroaches, they don't want to say. I think God gives me a license to look away to say, Mashiach, Mashiach, Mashiach. It's not for me. Not for me. You talk to him, and he's someone to talk to. His approach is he's not looking for any relationship with God. Not only that, he's looking to anger God. Why does someone go and eat cockroaches if it's disgusting? Because you are angry. Not only angry, you're looking to anger the one who forbade it. You want to show everybody, despite what the world says, I'm going to live like a crazy guy. I'm going to eat that which is naturally disgusting. I'm going to sit there and take a selfie of myself and put it on Facebook, that the whole world should know that I am different and I don't care what you guys. And you're going to get angry? That's what I want. That's my interest. So you might give up, say, I'm not going to educate. Comes the Torah, and specifically in the context of Katsim, says the Torah, lo tochlu, lo tachilu kisheket. Here is what the Torah comes in, and not only am expecting you as an adult to stay away, that you child to be involved with it. You can't say if that's what he likes, I'm going to give in to him because it's America and we have to give in to the kids. So if he likes to eat cockroaches, I'm going to go to the market and buy him a bag of cockroaches and put it into his supper. You have to be nice to your children. You got to be sensitive. How can I educate him? That's who he is. No, no. It's an area you try issues, major, but not because of it. This is not my area. Let him have what he wants, and that's it. This is number one. This is Sug Aleph, the first type of people. But as the Rebbe says, he writes that there are people who say that the time and place that we are now is that the nature of people is so coarse. So how am I going to try to teach them words of Torah and Irat Shamayim if they are so coerced, they are so gas? Comes the commandment that even if someone is eating creepy creatures, which means he's nishki mensch, he's not a person. Torah wants you to put the effort. Then there is type 2, the one who drinks blood. Regarding blood, we have an interesting verse later in Chumash Dvarim, on chapter 12. The Torah says again in the Deuteronomy regarding the prohibition of blood, and you know what it says there regarding blood? It says, chapter 12, yeah, it says, Rak Chazak, in verse 23, it says, Rak Chazak, long not to eat blood. What does it be strong not to eat blood? Don't eat blood. What does it be strong? So Rashi tells us, it's also from the Gemara, Rashi says that the statement be strongs teaches us that people used to eat blood exclusively. And the Torah has to find it necessary to say, be strong, be strong. Be strong means, I know it's something that you are commonly doing, and you feel like you are addicted to it, and you can get out of it. I tell you, chazak. That's why the Torah says, rak chazak, levilti achol adam. Says the Rebbe, this is the second type of person. You have a minor, and you say, am I going to educate him? He's addicted. You all know what addiction is today, right? Addicted. Should I tell him, stop going on your cell phone? He's addicted to his cell phone. He can't take off his eyes. He's addicted to whatever it is, to whatever schmutz it is. Addicted. So I'm going to have to, if he wants a cell phone, I'm going to buy him a cell phone because what should I do? Addiction, you can't stop it. Comes the Torah and tells you, in the context of blood, in that area which the Torah recognized people are addicted to the point that when the warning against eating blood came about, God had to use words. It doesn't say, be strong, don't eat pig. It doesn't say, be strong, don't steal. It says, nothing enough. Lo this, lo that. There's one place that the Torah has to tell you, chazak. Where? Why blood? Because you're addicted to it. Because you drink it, because you eat it. That's what Rashi says. So addiction needs special strength. And yet, in that context, comes the Torah and says, not only you, I'm expecting you to ensure that a minor is also not continuing with his addiction. This is number 2. As the Rebbe writes, people say, when can I try to influence the minor? When are we going to be able to see result in our education? Something which the child is not used to yet, is not addicted to. But the fact that he keeps on doing it and repeating it, then there's no hope. Says Rashi, says the Torah, in the area of blood, which is Chazak. Here is where I want you to emphasize the importance of education. Then comes case number 3, this week's Parsha. Tumat Kohanim. Tumat Kohanim is something which, if you try to teach it to a minor, there is no way you can explain it to him. Go to school and tell a minor that is a Kohen, you're a Kohen, young Kohen. Nebuch, your uncle passed away. I want to go to the funeral. What do you tell him? Oh, Kohen. Why? It was my best uncle. He gave me Hanukkah geld and Purim geld. And he was the uncle who always took me to the park, and he always was nice to me. But you're a Kohen. And he says, but what does Kohen have to do with going to a funeral? I don't know. God says that a Kohen goes to a funeral, he becomes contaminated. The Kohen comes home. He wants to marry a nice woman. Who happened to be she's divorced. Happens to be she's a convert. Nice girl. Never married. He's a convert. I'm a Kohen. What did we tell him? No. Why? He's nice. He's 100% Jewish. He did it 100% right. She worked very hard together. She's better than even the born Jews. Well, a Kohen, how's, I don't know. Think I know? The Torah says. What does it tell you? That the whole idea of Tumat Kohanim, of impurity Kohanim, is something which is irrational. Irrational. So the Rebbe says, this is the third type of people. The educator, the adult, may think to himself, what am I going to teach my children? What am I going to teach the minors? That which is rational. I can explain that. After they're going to learn and understand everything rational, then when they get older, I might tell them something which is irrational too. Because if you understand everything, you can also understand the thing which you don't understand. Right? An adult can understand the thing which you don't understand. Comes the Torah and tells you, no. The Emor, Ve'amata. In this area, which has to do with Tumat Kohanim, which is irrational laws, I'm expecting you to teach the children and to tell them, yes, this is what God wants, even though I don't understand why. It's called Chukim. Chukim. This is the 3 areas. The area which we called who is the one who is involved and completely distanced in a way that he can't, you assume that he's not going to hear anything because he's eating creepy, disgusting creatures. The one who is addicted because he's eating blood, and the one who is not seemingly ready to understand and to hear supernatural orders. And this is the 3 places the Torah says, don't give up on them. They are able to listen, and they are able to understand. Every Yid has a neshama in them, and because of the neshama which is inside, you can tell them everything. And the moment that you say, I can't talk to them about it, you are giving up hope of a real soul which could and is expected to separate itself in these 3 areas. Rebbe once said a story. Rebbe actually said more than once. I saw it at least in 3 places. One time I heard it, 1986. I think I heard it. It's definitely spoke about it, 1986. It's printed in the years before. The Rebbe said a few times a story about his father-in-law. And the story is partially about his wife. The Rebbe didn't specify, but the Rebbe said that my father-in-law told me that he hired a teacher called a Melamed for his children. The previous Rebbe had 3 daughters. One died in the Holocaust. The name was Rebbe Shena, and she was married to Mendel Akoyan Rubinstein, Bernstein. No, yeah, to Mendel. Then there was a sister who later came to America, Rari. And there was the Rebbe Chaim Mushke, 3 daughters here, not sons. And the previous Rebbe invited, he got a teacher. And that teacher somehow had in mind that he's only going to teach stories which can be explained rational. But stories of miracles and wonders, he was in the mind that this only fits to adults. And when the Rebbe Rashab, the previous Rebbe, heard about it, he immediately ordered his son to fire the teacher. He should not teach you kids. Education has to be that there is the world which is naturally run by God, and the same God conducts supernatural miracles. Don't be afraid to tell your kid all these funky stories that you read about the Baal Shem Tov, in Baba Sali, in Ben Ishchai, in all these people. You think, they're gonna laugh. Don't worry about it. This is the principal foundation to start, even to initiate education by relying on God, not only that which makes sense. Tell him nisim, tell him moftim, tell him miracles, tell him wonders. That are you planting in emunah into this child. And this is what the Torah says in this week's Parsha. Emor el bnei Aaron ve'amarta alehem. Rashi says, Emor ve'amarta, even in these laws, which are not sensible laws. It's not about staying away from stealing, which makes sense. The guy earned his money. Why are you taking it away from him? It's not about Lashon Hara, which makes sense. These laws, which is impurity, Tumah. Even there, when the Torah says, I'm expecting you and I'm wanting you to start and to initiate a dialogue with your kid about those things which are unexplainable. Now, what is the way to do it? Here comes a very interesting emphasis of the Rebbe in regarding the wording of Rashi. So you are looking in the English, so you can't always appreciate that inside, but trust me, the way it's written and the way the Rebbe put an emphasis about it is beautiful. Rashi says, Emor ve'amarta, comes to the Gemara, lehazir gdolim al aktanim. Gdolim, you all know, means adults. Ktanim means minors. Al means upon. What does lehazir mean? To warn. So usually the word lehazir means warning. Says the Rebbe. There's another word lehazir. They're coming now to the holiday of Lag BaOmer tomorrow night. What book did Rashi and Baruch Hai write? Zohar. Zohar. What does Zohar mean? What's the translation of the word Zohar? Light. Aha. So you see, lehazir does not only mean to warn, lehazir also means to shine, to illuminate. Lehazir gdolim al aktanim. It's not only the gdolim should warn the minors. It's the adults to serve as a shining example, al aktanim, on the minors. If you want to educate a child in any of these areas, is by being a shining example. You want to warn your child, you have to learn. He might accept it, he might not. But when you are showing him that the most important thing in your life is to learn, you're becoming a shining example, and he knows that the most important thing in his life is to learn. If you want to tell him, you have to be nice to others. I have to. I don't know if I have to. I don't know if you are always nice to others. But when you are a shining example of being nice and kind to others, then they know it's important. Then they know it's important. That's lehazir. to shine, to illuminate. That's why Rashi says, Lazir Gdolim Alaktanim, on the minors. Because when you become a beacon of light, it shines upon them. If you warn, Lazir Etaktanim, their minors. Because it's not only about warning. The Rebbe emphasized the word is Zohar, Lehazir. Sometimes it's even more than the words. You know, in Lubavitch, in the town of Lubavitch, in the yeshiva, there was a mashpia, one of the Hasidic guide. His name was Rabbi Bliner. Was a very, very strong Hasidic Jew, a oived, davened long many hours. And he taught in the yeshiva, but he got very old and very weak, and he wasn't able to teach much. And there was no money in the account, and they were looking to get someone younger to be able to communicate and teach classes better. And the Rebbe Rashab said, no, he has to stay on payroll, even though he doesn't teach. But his presence in the yeshiva, when they can look at him and see the image of a chassid, has a tremendous influence on the yeshiva students that maybe can't even be substituted with good teachers. This is called lehazir, someone who radiates light, radiates energy in his example of how a yid has to be, an example how a chassid behaves. This is called Zohar. And Rashi says over here, in the three places where he talks about taking care and warning the children, Rashi says, lehazir gdolim al aktanim. Don't just warn them, but shine upon them. Shine upon them. Zohar. And it doesn't just impact the child. Lehazir gdolim, Rebbe points out, also means that the gdolim become shining lights. When you are involved with helping someone else, with educating someone else, with training someone, preventing someone, your source of light enhances and becomes stronger. You're strengthening the light in upon you. You becoming a much better individual. The Azir Gdolim. And I guess the Azir also means not only to shine in you, but also how you communicate a message. You can communicate a message by telling the child how bad it is to eat something like that, and you can educate the child by showing him how significant he is. That it's not behold of him to be involved in something negative as that. Which usually, when you shine, you have a bigger chance to influence it. You say, forbidden, it's not for you. Or you say, I got who told me, somebody wrote me last week from a book of Rabbi Tversky from Pittsburgh, Rabbi Professor Tversky, that he said that his father never said, don't. Rather, he always said, "Se passt nicht." In Yiddish, "se passt nicht" means it's not beholden of you to act like that. So you're looking at a new, you, come on, Mela, this guy, you. That's called a hazir. You illuminate him, you shine on him.
Doesn't fit.
Doesn't
fit.
Doesn't fit you, exactly. That's called le'azir, to lift them up. Positive. To lift them up. To lift them up. Beneath you, exactly. To lift them up. That's called le'azir. So le'azir is to shine as an example to him. Le'azir gdolim al aktanim is to shine with an example on the minors. Le'azir gdolim al aktanim is for the adults to shine because they are involved in educating minors. Their shine becomes stronger. Lehazir. And Lehazir also is how do we impact the child when it comes to this type of children or involved in eating creeping creatures or blood or not wanting to hear about Tumah v'Tahara. Shine upon the light. Teach them about what kind of great neshama they have, and then they might become. And this is really the story of tomorrow's Yom Tov, Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer, everybody lights fires. We're turning on lights. And the reason is because Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, through his teaching of Zohar and Kabbalah, was able to illuminate and to kindle the light and the flame of every neshama by showing him his potential. Chelek Elokai Mimal Mamesh, Ayid is part of Hashem. That's what everybody celebrates like BaOmer, feels connected to the day. No one says Tachnun. To connect to this idea, Lehasvir, Zohar, or. And with this in mind you everybody that tomorrow night we're going to have our traditional barbecue. We're going to have it here because the rain is not whatever. Here we're going to have it as it is, rain or shine. There's hot dogs, watermelon, all the goodies that we eat. We're going to have a fire show. And later, if it gets dark, we're going to have Meirim, Gesund, and light a fire. Bezrat Hashem. Laila Tov, Lag BaOmer Sameach, and only
Thank
good
you,
news,
Rabbi.
everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome.
Thank
How
you,
old are
Rabbi.
No. Now you're scared to say.
No. As we read in the Passover that passed in the mountain, I'm like a man of 39.
Everybody okay? Thank you. Good to see you. Laila Tov.
In there.